I'm a 30-year-old nursing student and former Army veteran who's always been hands-on with my vehicles. I do about 90% of my own maintenance. The only things I can't handle are jobs requiring specialized equipment like tire balancing machines or engine hoists. I had just returned from a 6-month military mobilization where my Toyota pickup truck sat in dry storage. Being the responsible owner I am, I immediately got to work on the maintenance checklist. I replaced the fan belts, air filters, spark plugs, oil filter, and fuel filter. Did a full oil change and radiator flush. Checked the battery, all the connections, brake pads, and alignment. I even swapped out my winter tires for summer ones and updated my emergency kit for the season change. The final task was getting my tires balanced at the local tire shop. Since I had other errands planned and was tired of wearing uniforms in the desert for 6 months, I decided to dress up nicely: heels, dress slacks, silk blouse, and a tailored jacket with my hair in a neat bun. I walked into the tire shop and told the mechanic I just needed my tires balanced. He nodded and said it would take about 1 hour. I was about to leave for my other errands when I noticed they were already pulling my truck into the bay. Curious, I stayed to watch through the large front window. 2 mechanics started removing my tires while a third, the one who took my keys, just sat in the driver's seat writing on a notepad. After about 10 minutes, he came back inside with a serious expression. He told me that during their free assessment, he had found several serious safety issues that needed immediate attention. When I asked what these issues were, he launched into a long list. He claimed my fan belt needed replacement, that I was overdue for an oil change and radiator flush, that my fuel and oil filters were completely shot, my brake pads were worn down to nothing, and my alignment was so bad it had ruined my tires. He insisted they would need replacement instead of just balancing. He never once opened the hood of my truck. There's no way he could have seen most of these supposed issues without doing so. When I asked about the cost to make it roadworthy, he made a show of calculating in his notebook. He told me it would be roughly $3,700, but warned it could be more since my vehicle was an import and parts could be hard to find. I requested to speak with the manager, but he claimed the manager was out for the day. I asked him to confirm if he was really refusing to release my vehicle unless I paid $3,700 for repairs because it wasn't roadworthy. He confirmed this was the case and asked condescendingly if there was someone I could call for a ride home or someone I'd like to consult about such a large repair. His tone was dripping with condescension. I smiled sweetly and stepped outside to make a phone call to the sheriff's department. The officer assured me they would arrive within 15 minutes. I went back inside still smiling. I told him someone would be arriving shortly to help with the matter and requested the repair list and quote in writing. The mechanic happily wrote everything down and even signed it, adding that I could contact him directly when I was ready to proceed with the repairs. The supposedly absent manager walked in just as the sheriff was putting handcuffs on his employee. Turns out attempting to hold someone's vehicle hostage while trying to scam them out of thousands of dollars is illegal. The manager was mortified and insisted on balancing my tires for free. As I drove away in my perfectly maintained truck with newly balanced tires, I couldn't help but wonder how many other well-dressed women he'd successfully scammed before trying it on someone who actually knew their way around an engine. I'm what you'd call your typical Midwestern guy with Scottish roots, the kind who burns just thinking about sunlight. Picture a walking stereotype of paleness, complete with a massive red beard. I stand at 6'2", and thanks to my hobby of weightlifting, I'm built like a bear at over 300 pounds. My life took an interesting turn when I fell in love with and married my beautiful Mexican wife. We have 2 wonderful sons, and one of them recently married an amazing Guatemalan woman. Our family gatherings are a vibrant mix of cultures, and I've learned to appreciate being the odd one out at Mexican family barbecues. My daughter-in-law and I have grown quite close. She is currently expecting my first grandchild, and like many South Americans, she runs on coffee. We often go on coffee runs together, and I've been working hard on my Spanish to better communicate with her and the rest of the family. One day, We were sitting at this popular coffee chain in the mall. You know, the one with the mermaid logo. We were having a pleasant conversation in Spanish when things took an unexpected turn. This perfectly manicured woman, let's call her Karen, walked past our table. She was decked out in designer everything, from her shoes to her handbags to her sunglasses. She could have been the poster child for "I want to speak to your manager." What happened next still makes my blood boil. Karen completely ignored me and went straight for my daughter-in-law. She started screaming in my daughter-in-law's face, demanding that she speak English and telling her to go back where she came from. She even had the audacity to accuse people like my daughter-in-law of destroying this country. Now I was about to stand up and say something, but my daughter-in-law beat me to it. Without saying a word, she simply stood up and slapped those expensive sunglasses right off Karen's face, then sat back down to enjoy her coffee. Karen's reaction was exactly what you'd expect. She dropped to the ground and started wailing like she was auditioning for a soap opera. She screamed for someone to call the police and even the army, dramatically claiming that a foreign immigrant terrorist had just attacked her for no reason. Her husband came rushing over, probably thinking he was going to be the hero. He was this tiny guy, maybe 5 feet 6 and 125 pounds, soaking wet. He was about to get in my daughter-in-law's face when I stood up. Let's just say his courage evaporated pretty quickly when he had to crane his neck to look up at me. I warned him in no uncertain terms that if any part of him touched her, I would break it off and force-feed it to him. I told him to go away and take that thing, meaning Karen, with him. I've never seen someone backpedal so fast. They retreated to a booth on the other side of the coffee shop, but Karen wasn't done yet. Someone had called the police, and when they arrived, she launched into her elaborate fantasy version of events. She wailed to the officers about how she was just minding her own business when a crazed Islamic terrorist attacked her. She even accused me, calling me a red-bearded race traitor, claiming I had beaten up her husband and possibly broken his nose. She demanded we both be arrested immediately. The second officer came to our table, and my daughter-in-law showed her excellent acting skills. She turned on the waterworks and placed a protective hand on her belly, explaining through tears that the crazy woman had started screaming at her and she was just defending herself and her baby. I decided to put my privilege to good use. I told the officer that the establishment had security cameras, and there were at least a dozen witnesses who saw the woman's unprovoked tirade. I made it clear that my daughter-in-law wouldn't be answering any more questions without her attorney present. The officers reviewed the security footage and spoke to several witnesses. They came back and told us that while they didn't condone the slap, it was clearly self-defense and no arrests would be made. As we were leaving, I noticed Karen and her husband still sitting in their booth, her makeup running down her face from fake tears. My daughter-in-law walked past their table, head held high, and said something in Spanish that made Karen flinch. I didn't catch what she said, but the look on Karen's face was insane. The next time we went for coffee, we chose a different location, but my daughter-in-law and I still laugh about the day she taught a racist a lesson about minding her own business. These days, as I watch her with my grandchild, I'm reminded of how proud I am to have such a strong woman in our family. Though I still keep an eye out for designer-clad Karens whenever we go out for coffee, just in case. I recently moved to a different state for a promotion at work. The company covered all moving expenses, which was great, but little did I know this move would lead to one of the most frustrating experiences with an entitled mechanic who thought he could take advantage of an out-of-state newcomer. During our drive to the new state, I noticed my brakes were starting to vibrate slightly on the descent, accompanied by a faint squeaking sound. No big deal, I thought. Probably just needs new brake pads, maybe new rotors if they couldn't be machined. I've dealt with brake issues before with my 2005 Santa Fe, so I wasn't too worried. After settling into our new place, I decided to take my car to a local mechanic shop. It had good reviews and a coworker even recommended it. I dropped off my car for a tire rotation and a free inspection, specifically to check out the brake situation. I made it crystal clear to them, do not do any work without my explicit authorization over the phone and in writing. About an hour later, I called to check on my car. That's when things went south. The shop owner cheerfully told me that they'd already started working on my car, saying I needed new pads, rotors, and calipers. He quoted me $1,200 and said they'd have it done in a couple of hours. Shocked, I told him I never authorized any work to be done on my car. He tried to justify their actions by claiming the brakes were in terrible condition and they had to start right away for safety reasons. I immediately told him to stop all work and that I was coming over right away. Before heading to the shop, I called another mechanic shop with even better reviews for a second opinion. The female mechanic there told me this sounded very suspicious, explaining that calipers rarely need replacement unless there's serious damage. She mentioned they typically charge around $300 for new pads and rotors and offered to give me a second opinion. When I arrived at the first shop, I was fuming. I told the shop owner I was taking my car elsewhere for a second opinion, adding that if he was right about the calipers, I'd consider having him do the work. He responded by saying he could have it towed to another shop for $150, but claimed he legally couldn't let me drive it because it was unsafe and he'd be liable if my brakes failed. I called him out on this nonsense, telling him he was holding my car hostage. He said my only options were to either pay for the towing or let them finish the repairs. When I threatened to call the police and accused him of grand theft auto, he actually encouraged me to do so, claiming they would back him up and might even fine me for driving with destroyed brakes. So I called the non-emergency police line. The female officer who took my call was incredibly helpful, explaining that the shop owner had absolutely no legal right to hold my vehicle. She clarified that while I would be responsible for any problems if I drove with bad brakes, he wasn't liable at all and was actually breaking the law. I put the officer on speakerphone with the shop owner, who immediately questioned whether she was really a police officer, arrogantly claiming he'd done this before and knew the law. The officer told him he'd find out soon enough. 15 minutes later, a police car pulled up. The officers were already briefed on the situation. They walked straight up to the shop owner and handed him what looked like a citation or summons. They wouldn't tell me exactly what it was, but they seemed pretty satisfied with themselves. They ordered him to put my car back together immediately and let me leave. The whole ordeal took over 4 hours. When they finally brought my car out, the shop owner had the audacity to hand me a bill. $50 for the tire rotation and $100 for the inspection. I still had my original work order copy, and I pointed out that the tires weren't even rotated. With the police still present, he had no choice but to let me leave without paying a cent. I took my car to the second shop, and guess what? It only needed new brake pads. They machined the rotors, and the whole job cost just $200. Not only did I save $1,000, but I also found an honest mechanic in my new city. The shop owner had to deal with whatever the police gave him, and I later found out through my co-worker that the shop's reputation took a serious hit after I posted my experience on local review sites. Apparently, I wasn't the first out-of-state customer they'd tried to scam, but I was the first to involve the police. I heard they had to shut down 6 months later due to lost business. After 3 failed attempts and countless hours of practice, I finally passed my driving test last week. The journey wasn't easy. My anxiety had always gotten the better of me during tests, but this time, with the support of my amazing auntie who spent months helping me practice, I managed to keep my nerves under control. My auntie has been my rock throughout this entire process. Despite her mobility issues, she'd sit in the passenger seat for hours, patiently guiding me through different routes and helping me master parallel parking. She even helped me find my first car, a modest used hatchback that fit perfectly within my budget. I wanted to show her how grateful I was, so I decided to take her Christmas shopping and treat her to lunch. The day started great. I was still getting used to driving alone, but having my auntie beside me made me feel more confident. We headed to the small shopping center on the outskirts of town. The parking lot was notoriously tricky to navigate, with narrow one-way roads and limited spaces. The disabled parking bays were small, which seemed counterintuitive given their purpose. After circling around twice, we finally spotted someone leaving one of the disabled bays. I carefully maneuvered into the space, making sure my auntie had enough room to get her wheelchair out. We spent a couple of hours shopping and I treated her to lunch at her favorite cafe. By the time we returned to the car, my arms were full of shopping bags, and my auntie was tired but happy. When I loaded the bags into the trunk, the person parked next to us was also getting ready to leave. I got into the driver's seat, adjusted my mirrors, and was about to start reversing when this massive pickup truck stopped right behind three disabled bays, including ours. The driver, a man in his 40s wearing an expensive-looking suit, just sat there scrolling through his phone, completely blocking us in, despite there being several empty, regular spaces nearby. The person from the car next to us, an elderly gentleman, got out and approached the truck. Through my open window, I heard him politely ask the driver to move to a proper parking space since he was blocking several cars in. The truck driver didn't even look up from his phone as he told the elderly gentleman to back off, saying it wasn't his problem and we should figure it out ourselves. My auntie and I sat there completely stunned by his response. Several other people came by and asked him to move, but he either ignored them or responded with more profanity. 15 minutes passed, and the line of cars waiting to get through the narrow road was growing longer. Just when I was about to call for help, a police car pulled up. Two officers got out and assessed the situation. One of them spoke into their radio while the other started writing something in their notepad. Within minutes, a tow truck arrived. The truck driver finally emerged from the shop carrying a single small bag just as they were hooking up his vehicle. He started yelling, demanding to know what they thought they were doing. The first officer told him that he was being cited for multiple violations. The driver protested, claiming he was only gone for a few minutes and that they couldn't do this. The second officer listed off his violations: illegal parking, blocking access to disabled bays, obstruction of highway, expired vehicle tax, and having a bald tire. The truck driver's face turned bright red as he started screaming obscenities at the officers. He got right up in one officer's face, pointing and yelling about who he was and threatening to have their badges. When the first officer asked him to step back and lower his voice, he responded by shoving the officer. Big mistake. Within seconds, both officers had him against the hood of their patrol car, announcing he was under arrest for assaulting a police officer and disorderly conduct. When they handcuffed him, he kept yelling about his father being a lawyer and threatening to sue everyone. The officers remained professionally calm as they rid him his rights and placed him in the back of their patrol car. One of the officers came over to check on us, apologizing for the wait and letting us know we could leave. My auntie thanked him, adding a comment about how some people needed to learn that having an expensive truck didn't make them own the road. As we finally drove away, we could still hear the truck driver yelling from inside the police car. My auntie made a joke about how this had turned into quite the entertainment for our shopping trip. We both burst out laughing. It wasn't exactly how I'd planned to spend my afternoon, but watching that entitled jerk get his comeuppance definitely made it memorable. We later found out through local news that his company car privileges were revoked after his employer saw the viral video someone had recorded of his meltdown.